If you're gonna make a dual-stick shooter that takes place on an ultra-violent futuristic game show, then you better be prepared for the Smash TV comparisons. For gamers of a certain age, this was their first introduction to the subgenre, and it ranks as one of the most intense shoot-'em-ups of all time. The new game, Freakout, Calamity TV Show, was definitely inspired by the Midway Classic, because it takes the setup of Smash TV and adds a surprisingly compelling story to the mix to create an action game that goes well beyond the big money, big prizes. I love it. But is this interesting twist on the theme enough to make up for the ugly graphics, the bad gameplay, and a whole showcase full of bugs? Let's find out. Although the setup is straight out of Smash TV, Freakout actually has a lot more in common with Portal. We start out as a normal contestant on a dystopian game show about killing waves of mutants, but everything changes as we shoot our way backstage and learn the truth about an evil company called PhysiCorp. Things only get more complicated as our hero is fed contradictory information from different sides of the fight, which, as you might expect, ultimately involves the violent protest group Antifas. This sets up what should have been a biting satire on commercialism and the evil lengths that massive corporations will go in order to poison society. Instead, however, Freakout ends up being a pretty standard action game where you go from location to location, killing wave after wave of mutants. And with new enemies being added complete with slickly produced video packages, it often feels like you're still participating in that violent game show. Look, as disappointing as the squandered idea is, it's not even close to being the biggest problem in Freakout. But before we get into the many reasons why you should skip this game, I first want to talk about one thing that I genuinely like, and that's the level designs. They aren't always memorable, but I appreciate that the game stages the action in more than just a boring arena. There are walls, tables, and rooms to fight through, as well as destructible environments that you can knock down. It also isn't afraid to get wacky, like when we get into a shootout inside of a perfectly recreated version of that Pac-Man maze. Yeah, it's a bit silly, but it does give the game some much needed personality. Unfortunately, the level designs and story are pretty much the only two things this game has going for it. This is a bland, frustrating, and often broken shoot-'em-up that is neither as clever nor exciting as it thinks it is. It's also incredibly ugly. The tiny graphics and muted colors welcome you to Freakout. And it only gets worse from there. From the character designs, to the drab textures, to the grainy cinemas introducing each enemy, this game looks like a relic from the original PlayStation. The unpolished visuals are only made worse by what can best be described as an unstable frame rate problem. With mutant enemies of all shapes and sizes rushing at you, there are times when the animation chugs to a crawl. And it's not just slowdown issues, but the sensation that frames are actually being dropped. Everything sputters and jerks around, which makes Freakout impossible to play for long stretches of time. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that the frame rate issues actually hurt my eyes. Now, beyond the presentation, Freakout has a lot of collision detection problems. You'll notice that the hit meter is inconsistent from one monster to the next, setting up situations where you can be killed by enemies that aren't even close to you. This is especially bad during a certain boss fight against a war train, which is this thing that just keeps on tossing these steel balls at our hero. This is the kind of onslaught that would normally be easy to avoid, but is made so much more frustrating by the awful collision detection. I mean, there are times when you'll seemingly pass right through the giant cannonballs, while other times it seems like you'll die without them even hitting you. These kind of cheap deaths are never fun. Oh, and it doesn't end with the shoddy gameplay, because Freakout is also broken. We see glimpses of the bugginess early on when enemies are literally jumping out of the level into their deaths. Look, suicidal bad guys is one thing, but what's really annoying is when the waves of bad guys stop charging at you and you're stuck exploring a completely empty room. You see, the game has this weird problem of not triggering the next story beat or checkpoint and instead locking you in a level with nothing to do. The only solution is to die or restart the level from the beginning. And let me tell you, this happens constantly. I ran into this bug more than a dozen times while playing through the campaign, including some times where it actually happened several times in a row on the same level. It was during those moments when I seriously debated quitting the game once and for all. Yeah, I should have listened to my gut. After being pleasantly surprised by the story and setup, Freakout, Calamity TV Show ultimately disappointed by being an ugly, frustrating, and toothless exercise in repetition. The bland textures, awful collision detection, and painfully unstable frame rate problems completely overshadowed the few unique and compelling bits. And all that's before you realize that the game is teeming with nasty bugs, some of which might as well be game-breaking. Look, I love the idea of Smash TV with a deeper story, but Freakout gets way too much wrong for me to recommend it. Nope, I would not buy that for $1. Hey, thanks for watching our review. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we post new reviews and features almost every day. Now here's the question I have for you. What is your favorite dual-stick shooter? Look, I have a real soft spot for Smash TV, but there have been so many great ones over the last decade or two. I can't wait to see what you pick in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back tomorrow with a review of Can Androids Pray Blue, followed by reviews of Hyper Parasite, Risk and Ruin, Foregone, and more. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then.